really. People like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.
This is a conversation with my girl Melissa, following up after my 10,000th video about the closely related issues of jealousy, envy, beauty, physical appearance, how our society works and how it doesn't. But I'd phrase the topic of this video a little bit more in terms of the potential for shallow people to change. And I think most of us, maybe all of us, if we remember far enough back into our youths, at some point we were shallow people. And probably some part of us is shallow still. Even if it's only for a few hours a day, you probably have your few shallow hours per day. And we're going to talk about ourselves. We're going to talk about our own real lives and experience here. I want to start with my father. All right. My father may not have been perceived as a shallow guy. He was absolutely as shallow as they came. And as a young man in high school, it was not easy for him to get the attention of women. It was not easy for him to get the affection of women. And he never got over it. He went into acting. He went into theater. And this was absolutely transparently to get the attention and affection of women. And look, compared to some other strategies in life, you can say that it works, or you can say that it's not entirely evil or entirely awful. Learn to talk a good game, learn to have some stage presence, learn, get some, And he went from theater into politics, extreme, cult-like fringe politics, and he went into religion. That's the part nobody wants to talk about with my father, was his years as some kind of Christian existentialist. He was a Christian preacher of sorts, as well as being a communist and left-wing preacher. And it was all about women. It was all about sexuality. It was all about getting laid. It was all about his ego. He never got over it. And I got to tell you something. As an old man, every business meeting, everything in his office, if you ever saw him in the room with young women, women who were young enough to be impregnated, put it that way, hypothetically, always, he was constantly holding court and trying to fascinate people. It's really, in the truest sense of the word, it's beyond being the center of attention. This shallow sense of competing for being the cleverest and the most attractive and, whatever. It was an act. He was an actor. And he never stopped playing the part. And politics for him was never about helping the weak and the poor and the downtrodden. Never. And Christianity for him was never about helping the weak and the poor and the downtrodden. And by the way, if you guys haven't heard already, he had 9 kids with a whole bunch of different women. And I think if you talk to anyone from his communist organization other than him, He intentionally ended up with a swinging, free love type of communist organization, and he slept with as many women as possible. And here's the plot twist. I think the vast majority of people perceive my father as some kind of profound, bookish intellectual. He was not. What he did with his life, intellectually, was every bit as shallow as what these girls are doing on Instagram, or what, a young man who works out at the gym and is showing his body on Instagram. It was every bit as shallow, but what he had to show off, what he did to get attention and affirmation, you still like ego affirmation from women, what he did was just much more intellectual than physical. Right? So, now look, do shallow people change? Can shallow people change? Profound and deep people can become shallow. We know that. Anyone can become a cocaine addict. Anyone can just start devoting their life to self-indulgence stuff. I feel I've become shallower as I got older, because a lot of the more profound things in my life really just didn't work out and end in tragedy. So it's easy to have a kind of facile point of view where you say, of course, shallow people can gain a more profound appreciation for life, or be engaged with something deeper in life. I don't know if they can. I don't know. And, let's be real. It's in large part because of the type of rewards that their shallowness is going to give them, whether that's positive ego affirmation. And remember, for my dad, it's not like he slept with all these women. Like, for every one woman he actually seduced and slept with, he was seducing all the time. He was wanting that attention. And I mean, that's a lot like Instagram. Like, I mean, what percentage of the women, of these women, they're flirting with people all the time. They're being seductive all the time. And it's like one out of 1,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000 they'll actually sleep with or even have a date with or even kiss or something. But, you can get addicted to, the positive ego, feedback and affirmation and stuff. Now, so Melissa's with me here off camera. And Melissa, you've gone through the most extreme cultural experiment. Because when she got with me, I used to say she had pretty face privilege. Something we really had to talk about. Your whole life, almost your whole life, since you went through puberty or something. Just the fact that you're a good-looking woman, she's slim with a pretty face. And then especially in China, when she was a good-looking white woman living in China, she had unbelievable pretty face privilege. Everyone thinks you're brilliant even too. People think you're intelligent, you're good at your job, and you're charming, whatever. All this positive. And then she got into this battle with acne, and she's currently halfway into a 6-month treatment of Accutane, really serious medical treatment for this acne. She probably should have done it 5 years ago or something. We figured out there's really no other way to go with her acne condition than serious medical treatment. And she went to the opposite extreme. I mean, she was with me in Taiwan, which is culturally Chinese, and she then went to being treated as a pariah, being treated as someone who was incredibly ugly, someone who was reviled, someone people felt disgusted by and they felt uncomfortable looking at you. And I couldn't. So we got to see both sides of it with job interviews too. So for me also, I had so many job interviews in China. For me as a man, where the only thing talked about was how handsome I was. Where that was the basis. Like, wow, this is a shallow culture. And this is a culture that's way more comfortable talking about like male beauty or male attractiveness openly than Western culture. But I mean, likewise, Melissa, people were running up to offer her jobs on the street in China when she didn't want a job. She wasn't looking. People were trying to recruit her just because she was good looking. And then we went from that to the opposite extreme, where we went to job interviews. Can we say we're certain a lot of those job interviews, they turned both of us down? They turned us down because of Melissa's face, because of the acne, So you've seen the full gamut. And you've seen it also. So Melissa, I mean, okay, you can tell me there's a chicken and egg problem here. So that, by the way, that means there's a question of which one really came first of two things that are intertwined. My impression of you, Melissa, is that one of the reasons you fell in love with me was that you wanted to lead a more meaningful life. You wanted to be more of a real intellectual. You didn't want to be a shallow person skating by through life the way you had been. And you saw in me, she was attracted to me, she fell in love with me, but also she saw in me a way to switch tracks and really get into leading a more meaningful and substantive life.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. What you say is all true. All the biographical details are true. I must say I resent it too, the fact that because I had a pretty face that I was treated differently.
Mm-hmm. Low expectations. Go on.
I think the sad thing is people make excuses for women just because they look a certain way. Because I look small-statured, I look feminine. I think typically people wouldn't expect much of me as a woman. So I do kind of resent that. I didn't really have the development that I should have had at a younger age.
You mean in terms of being challenged or more?
Yes. Yes, in terms of being challenged, how people treated me.
She really learned to talk while we were just mentioning in terms of the role of silence versus speech. Like you were very literally not expected to speak for yourself. You were used to kind of standing around awkwardly and looking at the ground and other people. That's a very palpable example of this. Like you can talk about low expectations and stuff, but that gives you something that's easy to understand. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and as uncomfortable as it might be to look back at the videos that we recorded initially, it is interesting to see it because that was who I was at the time. And that's the kind of development I had in terms of linguistic, expressing myself, those kinds of skills, I think were stunted partly because of, my own doing. But it's also, like I said, I resent that there were low expectations for me because I looked a certain way. And it is also uncomfortable looking back on it. And I made this comment to you regarding Kristen Leo, that I think 10 years from now, she'll look back on these videos that she's recording now and say, wow, I looked really beautiful, or that was my period of being beautiful and in the limelight. That was my period of fame. And now I'm older and I have, it's up to her how she's going to change in the next 10 years. Is she going to develop as an intellectual? Is she going to have something else to be proud of, something else, not even necessarily to be proud of, but to have like self-respect? I think that's the number one thing, like finding something that you yourself are going to value, something that's not going to fade away. And what I've discovered is what doesn't fade away is really intellectual development and learning. Maybe not even if people aren't interested in philosophy, or if they're not interested in learning specific things, like at least you can learn how to handle yourself better. And that is very valuable.
I would say you can learn how to learn. I mean, it may sound a little bit overly,
No,
right. you become a lifelong, you become a person of learning, a person who,
That's right.
The musculature of learning, if you like. Yeah.
I just say I don't expect everybody to be interested in philosophy. I don't expect everybody to be interested in the same things that I have been. Part of the reason why I fell in love with you is because I think I really admire and respect your knowledge base, that you've actually read books on history, on political matters around the world. You just have a genuine fascination with the world, a genuine curiosity, and I think that's the most wonderful thing about being a human being is the curiosity. It doesn't have to fade away, and you don't necessarily have to become jaded with life. You can find new things to learn, and right. Even though it might be hard. I mean, one comment that you made in your video is that people who have been addicted to playing video games all their lives, it's hard to say. Or it's easy to say.
It's easy for an outsider to say, just start doing something meaningful and profound. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's easy to say, find a new hobby. Hard for the actual person to come up with a new hobby or start a new hobby, because you're starting from a level of stupidity. And it's accepting the stupidity that is also hard. At least it was for me. Like I said, some people had expectations of me just because of my appearance, or because I was able to put on a face of looking intelligent. And I think that was a big part of me in my adolescence and early 20s, is having the appearance of knowing what I'm talking about, or like what I'm thinking. But this deep insecurity of not really having the tools, the skills, the curiosity just about.
I want to pause on this. When you and I first got together, also, you perceived your own beauty and intelligence very differently too, right? So we had conversations early in this relationship. Melissa had the attitude that she had not been a good-looking person growing up, that she hadn't been pretty, that she had been disadvantaged this way. And we had conversations and pointed out to her, look, you have these different anecdotes, like during university and even during high school, of guys really trying to sleep with you when you made no effort to attract them or seduce them. Like, she didn't even say a word. Like, she sat there silently, and these guys got their courage together and really, tried to pitch, I think in every single case they were trying to pitch a long-term relationship. Actually, I don't think any of them were trying to pitch a one-night stand. But, and like really saying to us, no, wait, stop and think about it. That doesn't happen to every girl. There are women who their whole lives have never had that experience once. And there are women who only have that experience when they really dress up in a short skirt and a push-up bra and really go out, and they make kind of 9/10 of the effort for the guy. They really kind of set up the interaction or something. And you were sitting here, kind of staring into space. And actually, no, this happened, many times during your high school. Like, no, this isn't. So, I mean, that's another interesting thing, is the perception versus the reality. Now, there actually is something parallel, I think, intellectually, like in terms of how good looking you are. And yes, it's within your culture, and yes, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But nevertheless, there are really stark inequalities we're talking about here. As I say, some people never have that experience, and so on and so forth. And I have to reflect on that in my own life too. Intellectually, things can be effortless for you without you really realizing they're effortless until or unless maybe you meet someone else for whom it was a big up and you realize, oh, okay, wow, I did this effortlessly. And, then also the kind of privileges and the experience you have growing up in society based on your appearance. If you don't really force yourself to think analytically and sympathetically, like, no, there were other people who would have to work really hard for the same thing, or there were other people who couldn't have that at all, no matter how much hard work they put in, right? So on and so forth.
That's right. It is a bit of a tragedy that I didn't know the reality of it.
So I just mentioned, like, Melissa, I do consider Melissa naturally gifted at learning Chinese. And it's one of her talents. I don't think Melissa is naturally gifted at ancient Greek philosophy. Yeah. No offense. But, she makes the effort and she gets the results. I mean, it sounds like I'm talking about working out at the gym here. You put in the effort, you get the results. I mean, these are two of many, many areas in which Melissa's had a ton of personal growth in the last 2 years. I mean, she basically never heard of the Chinese language before, started learning Chinese. She had no familiarity with ancient Greek and ancient Roman sources and started learning that stuff. She just started taking life seriously and learning in different ways. But even then, I would point out, there is an underlying question of talent and ability. So, I have a million brothers and sisters. One of my brothers is dyslexic from birth. But, whether or not something that obvious, not everyone could just pick up Aristotle and start trying to make progress there, even if you're not naturally gifted at that. And not everyone could just start learning Chinese at, what were you, 26 or something, 25, something like that, and start. Not everyone could just start doing that. So I just say it is interesting also the way in which this experience of shallowness and the struggle not to be shallow, the struggle to be a more meaningful intellectual person, it's still inframed by, things that are to some extent fixed from birth or fixed from an early age in our development, or things that we maybe at least struggle against from an early age. Yeah.
And it can be humbling to accept your stupidity.
Yes.
In these, but I've learned to. It was hard, and I saw your video that you put together of Supreme Banana saying that she's blocking or unfollowing women that she feels make her feel.
For those who didn't see the clip, this is another YouTuber called Supreme Banana. She's alluding to a moment when Supreme Banana, a YouTuber here, said that she herself systematically blocks women on Instagram whom she finds too pretty, women who make her feel insecure about herself, including women that she's personal friends with in real life. And she actually takes the further step of recommending this to the audience. Like, it's a good thing to do for your so-called self-love or self-care, is to, I think, out of jealousy or envy or insecurity, block anyone, mute anyone, avoid looking at anyone on the internet who's prettier than you are, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying, it's humbling to remind yourself that you are stupid in certain areas.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't improve and learn and then, get to a certain level of competency. So let's say you don't know much about philosophy. You can at least work on that. It doesn't have to be something that is unchangeable, something that you always have to feel insecure about. Like, oh, when people bring up philosophy, I just, I don't know what to say, or I just don't know what to say because I haven't read it. Well, that's something that you can change. That's the wonderful thing about life, is that you can read up on topics and then have something to say.
A little bit deeper on exactly the same point. Mm-hmm. Maybe one of the unique things about the life of the mind, about intellectual pursuits, is that there's still value in failure.
Yeah.
Like, you can struggle to study philosophy or politics and fail, and then have the failure, and that still has some kind of positive value in your life.
That's right.
Like, if you try to be a weightlifter or try to be a bodybuilder and you fail, maybe that's entirely negative. Mm-hmm. We can think of a lot of long-term bad consequences for that. Or even, you might say, the type of humiliation involved in trying to, your goal is you spend 2 years trying to bench press 200 pounds. We know a guy like that through YouTube, actually, a guy I've talked to. He spent years really working out every day, and his goals were pretty humble. It was like bench press 200 pounds. It was some stuff like this. He had a list of things, and he never accomplished those goals. So that may be humiliating in a way that's completely unproductive. But I think the type of failure, what if you struggle to learn Chinese and you can't do it? At least you've got the struggle. And I think there's probably tremendous educational value in that struggle and in that failure. There's something you learn that's really worthwhile. And that's different from I don't know, you wear a short skirt and a push-up bra and you try to be the tardiest tart on Instagram and you fail. And there's a lot of that going on in real life. Yeah. So
what you used to say on your channel is you try and
yes.
get your heart broken over and over again. That is the hardest thing, is when you try and you fail, but you can't just get mired in your failures. You can learn from them and progress as an individual and not just mope around. I mean, that was really my problem. I felt stunted, and I gotta say, I did not address. The reason I bring this up is because Supreme Banana is unblocking people that presumably on Instagram it's just about their appearance or what they're expressing, what they're doing with their lives, that she feels insecure about herself. So that can only be altered so much. Your beauty can't be changed that much as your brain can, as much as you can actually learn and improve in other aspects of your life. In some ways, your face is the face that you were born with, barring plastic surgery, which probably will make you look worse overall. You can't actually change yourself that much. Of course, I'm all for improving your health and fitness, and that's something that you actually helped me with, because I had never lifted weights. I'd never even had that like small accomplishment. Like, you talk about the humiliation of weightlifting. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to accept that, like, wow, when I met you, I was 24 years old and I'd never
She'd never lifted 10 pounds. Like, I was with her when she did 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15, when she was doing really, really at the lowest. Really?
Right, yeah. What I'd been taught was mostly cardio and to be thin, maintain a low weight, and, calorie count so that you don't gain weight. As opposed to actual growth, like literally growing.
Yes, growth.
Yeah, I experienced both, like, growing physically, muscle, that is literal strength, but it also involves a lot of humiliation and just realizing, wow, like I'm at such a low level of strength that I'm building up from the very basics. But I'm happy I did it. And I just want to say, like, I don't think I made the personal growth earlier on that I should have, in terms of like feeling insecure about myself, because by the time I met you, I was extremely insecure with my appearance, but I had been for 10 years before that. And I didn't really make that progress to saying, well, this is not, yes, beauty is something that is objective. But it took many hours of talking with you philosophically about it, or like just thinking through things and reasoning through it, rather than getting upset and saying like, oh wow, I feel so ugly, or like, I'm hideous, and everybody else is more beautiful than me. Every woman has a more beautiful body than me, more voluptuous and stuff. Like all this was really weighed on me, and like it doesn't help to block out the other women who are more beautiful than you. That's what I've found, even though it's hard as hell to like accept, like I get it. I really sympathize with Kristen Leo. I really sympathize with Supreme Banana, that if you feel insecure, it maybe feels like it's the right thing to do to just block it out. But if you walk outside, you're going to see beautiful women. You're going to see people that you feel, insecure around. And that's just, you have to develop something.
Okay. But let's just nail this a little bit harder. Okay. If you want to be a novelist, can you just not read novelists who are more successful than you?
Right. Yeah.
If you're a filmmaker, you're like, oh, I don't like walking past the cinema because I see the movie posters of filmmakers who are more successful than I am.
You're right.
And again, it's not just success. Like, you can talk about quality or craft. Like, oh wow, like that filmmaker can do things I can't do. That novelist can do, like. I mean, it's kind of obviously sick and twisted and screwed up when we're talking about the life of, and it's sick and twisted and screwed. It's more sick and twisted when it's your body or your face, because you can't change it. And some people are really ugly. For some people, this is a burden they really, really have to bear, where it's not just neurosis. Like, no, for real, you were born with this huge disadvantage in life.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry if I'm sorry.
Wait, real. I like. Yeah, okay.
I have a point. But I just, sorry, I'm not getting to it quick enough. But yeah, my point is it's really hard to accept, but it doesn't help. Like, I just want to say, like, I didn't make that personal growth because, number one, I was in a relationship beforehand where the person was telling me all the time, like, no, you're the most beautiful, like, woman in the world to me, like, I find you so beautiful and stuff, like, and I knew it. I was still deeply insecure. It doesn't matter being told how many times and that you can hear from somebody that you love, like, oh wow, you're really beautiful, or like, I find you so beautiful. That doesn't really help, because like what I was really needing was the actual ability to reason through it and realize, like, beauty is just beauty. What you can actually work on is what you can be proud of. Like, that's what you should be proud of, because there's such a hollowness in saying, like, yes. And you mentioned the other day that you saw a video from some woman who was boasting about just like her looks, like, I'm so beautiful, and I've attracted like all these men, all these hip men in the hip hop world, like they all want to sleep with me and stuff, or they all have slept with me. She's bragging, she's boasting about being so beautiful, that she's attracted to this. There's such a hollowness in that, and I don't. How can anyone? I guess if that's what you have to be proud of, it's just kind of sad to me, like that's what you've got to hang your head on when you get home from work, or when you get home when you
get home from the gym, maybe, right?
Yeah, right. Like, wow, I'm beautiful or whatever, because it's really shallow, and what really matters to me, I mean, is just more depth. How could I have been confident in myself? How could I have been self-respecting, or how could I have liked myself when I didn't have the qualities? I was at a stage in my life when I didn't have anybody pushing me to develop intellectually, or develop, like, as an adult, or be, respect myself as an adult, like being, anyway, so I just say, yeah.
Look, so I would say, I don't even think confidence comes from success or capability, right? Like, in a sense, confidence comes from trying things and failing too, right? Like, this comes back to this issue of failure being really positive when it's intellectual nature. So we were talking to someone yesterday, and he said, well, learning Greek is really difficult. And I said, well, yeah, but it's not more difficult than Chinese, Pali, Sanskrit, Cambodian, Laotian, right? Now, in a lot of ways, these things in my life have been failures. I want to come back to the nature of failure briefly a little bit here. But I can look at learning Greek and I can feel confident. And it's not a false sense of confidence. It's not a boasting sense of confidence. It's not something fake. It's not something I'm trumping up for the camera. I have confidence that's based on trying and doing that sort of thing. And it's also based on trying and failing, right? And, you could say that also about physical fitness or other things. Like, I have enough experience lifting weights and working out to know what I can do, what I can't do, what I could just barely do. Also, like, how much time would be involved. Like, okay, if I stop doing everything else and just work out, then this is possible. And how much is reasonable. So, I mean, it's not confidence from accomplishment even. It's in significant part, confidence from failure. Now look, I think what's most bizarre about attractiveness and attraction and beauty in this is that our own relationship to it is so arbitrary and out of our control. I think it totally shaped my father for his whole life, that he tried to seduce women when he was still in high school or what have you, and failed. He just never got over it and stuff. And I mean, most of my failure in life, she said this to me the other day when we were at the airport, most of my failures in life have not been my own fault, which is very different. That shapes me in a different way. My father got a scholarship to learn Sanskrit at Harvard University, Harvard School of World Religions, and he failed. He fundamentally could not do it. It wasn't in him. He didn't have the talent or the focus or whatever. He lacked what it took to do Sanskrit, and that's something he had to live with, and in some ways he compensated for the rest of his life. Now I have to admit in this also, I mean, my own failures, it's like, well, the university is screwed up. This is the problem. That's the problem. I've faced these really weird institutional hurdles as a Canadian citizen studying in really bad universities, or where the language I'm studying isn't taught by the university at all, and this kind of thing. There are these huge, terrible obstacles to me that have nothing to do with my ability. No one ever said to me, you know what, kid, you can't hack it in philosophy. Or, you know what, kid, you're not good at writing essays about politics. Or, you know what, kid, you're not going to learn Chinese. You know what, kid, you just don't have what it takes to learn this language or do this kind of research. On the contrary, I had professors telling me that I was brilliant, that I was naturally gifted, that I was a genius even. Some of them use the word genius. At the same time that they were telling me, look, this university is terrible. There's no program for this. There's no way to get ahead. Yeah. You know, often it was with the caution that nevertheless I was going to fail. Like, look, you're talented and you're good at this, but you know, there's no route forward for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, but look, this fits into, okay, one of the most bizarre things as a man is talking to men who get with women and they attribute it to some effort. They like, it's because I worked out of the gym, or it's because I was charming, or because I spoke to her in this certain way. It's like, no, she just found you attractive, period. You know, it doesn't even matter that you're objectively unattractive. I mean, what one woman in 1,000 finds me attractive, but they find me really attractive. I mean, it's not that many women, but I mean, you know, every so often I connect with women on random, and I can tell the chemistry is there. They really go for it. I don't have a big head about it, but like if I convinced myself, like, oh, that's because I was wearing this cologne today or something, or you know, like men will attribute cause and effect to it. Oh, that's because I spoke to her in a certain way. That's because of something I did or whatever. And it's like, no, you know, where it's just arbitrary that you happen to meet someone who really finds you're their type, however you want to put it. They find you attractive. There's some chemistry. There's something they relate to there. So that's even more bizarre. Now, is it arbitrary whether or not you're good at learning Chinese? You know, whether or not you've got what it takes to sit down and practice memorizing these symbols and stuff? I mean, at least it's not as meaningless as whether or not someone likes the shape of your ass.
Right.
I mean, that is really, you know, that is really what we're philosophizing about here.
Yeah. You are, what I really admire about you is that you don't get an ego trip. I know maybe some people think that you do, but out of being the smartest person in the room, you say that you really want the challenge from somebody who's intellectually superior to you, or somebody who's got more experience than you. You really want that. Sure. And I love that about you. And I love that love of learning that you really have, the curiosity. I don't know where, you know, it stopped for me, but like I said, it's a lot of suffering. And for me, I fought it like every step of the way. You know, people don't know this because I was in your YouTube videos for a while and then I wasn't. And it was because like I fought it like tooth and nail to like see myself on camera. Like seeing yourself on camera and hearing yourself on audio is like one of the hardest things, because you really are able to critique yourself, and you're able to pick apart everything you say, and you're like, wow, that was stupid, or like, wow, that was...
For those of you who have done this, you hear what you said and you remember what you meant to say.
Exactly.
Oh right, this was the point I was trying to get at. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Right. And there was a lot of suffering, and you really tried, and there are certain things that are just hard to learn, and you have to learn them on your own time, even though like you tried to tell me so many things to like help me get through it. You know, at a certain point, it just takes like your own failure, recognizing your own failure and being okay with that and learning from it, and realizing, oh, okay, well, I don't have to just say like, okay, if after a while it turns out I'm just bad at being on YouTube, I'm bad at talking, I'm bad at being on camera, that's okay. But like at the same time, it doesn't help to just be like mired in despair about it and be like, oh my gosh, you know, so stupid, everybody saw me, was so stupid, you know, and this kind of humiliation. It's real suffering and it's real struggle. And when I talk to people close to me in my family, you know, when I say to them, like, really, to me, life is not about happiness, because what I've found meaning in is really struggling. And in these past 2 years, when I've struggled so much and like gone through a lot of personal growth, even though it's really hard, it's what I find meaningful. And I, you know, I'll stand by that. I don't think life is about happiness, and life isn't about unfollowing or blocking people who make you feel sad or make you feel insecure about yourself. It's about addressing that and actually facing that head on.
Okay, look, so I want to keep this all the way real, and I don't want this to be entirely self-centered. So that's why I'm adding this anecdote here. I think a lot of people have had this kind of experience, but they just don't talk about it. They don't talk about it honestly. When I was in junior high, about that age, there was a girl in class with me who was deformed, not naturally, not just retarded or something. Her mother took a medication during pregnancy that results in the fetus being deformed. And so her whole body was kind of deformed. Like, her face and her skull shape was kind of not right. And her arms and her legs didn't really move properly, right? Okay. I don't know if she was mentally impaired. She was in the same class I was in, so I guess she could write the tests or whatever. But yeah, she seemed stupid. She spoke poorly. I think her jaw and mouth weren't properly formed. She was a deformed person. And at that school, I really think schools shouldn't do this, but they did like secret Valentine Day or something, where like each student was supposed to tell the other students they had a crush. Homie, don't play that. Don't do that. It's really stupid. And a lot of so all the girls kind of knew in advance. A lot of the girls were laughing me and making fun of, oh, ha ha ha, like the retarded girl has a crush on you or something. Or this thing. And now, I wasn't cruel about it, I wasn't mean about it, but I think the reason why the girls were making fun of me was like they expected me to do some kind of politically correct thing where like I pretended this was reciprocated or wanted to do this. It's like, no. Like this is the reality. No, I'm not attracted to you. Like, no, I'm not going to pretend. Like, no, like I'm sorry. Like, what, like you don't directly say like you're a deformed person, but like, like this is the reality. There's a total stark inequality here where no, I'm not going to pretend to go on a date with you or something. And the girls in the class, I wouldn't even say I had a crush on. I didn't have any crush on, but the girls in the class I might have been interested in were inexorably the women who were in not any way disabled or deformed or what have you. They were the best looking girls in the school or what have you. That's a natural tendency. And I just want to add, at that age, you can't even talk about intellect or intelligence or sophistication because nobody has any intellect or intelligence or sophistication. There were people who told me I was smart as a kid, but come on, get real. At that age, I was still playing video games and stuff. Like, I just say, like, it's not like you can say, oh, there are some smart people. No, we're all dumb. We're all dumb together when you're kids. Especially looking back now, you got to realize this. So it's even more purely about that. You know what I mean? So I just want to emphasize, like, to a much greater extent than the life of the mind, people are born into a prison of the flesh, and you're stuck with it forever, and you can't change that. And you can work out at the gym, and you can be stronger relative to your own potential, relative to what's natural for you, relative to what's possible for you, but that's it. And some people have big round shoulders and some people are never going to have big round shoulders, when you get down to a kind of muscle group by muscle group. And for some people, it's kind of easy to have visible abdominal muscles and a six-pack. Some people are never going to have that. And some women will never have big breasts and some women will always have big breasts. And like, that is it. And the most terrible, immutable aspect of beauty, no doubt, is just the human face. Because there is no workout at the gym for your face, and if you think it's a no big deal to pay a surgeon to get out a chisel and literally break your nose and reset your nose, just look over at Kal-El's channel. It's a big deal, homie. Don't kid yourself. It's a big deal. So yeah, there's all this to be said, but I think my message in this video, which I didn't think of, we've talked before. Fundamentally, the life of the mind is mutable. You can change who you are. You can become a better person. And we open with this example of my father. Even if you have bad motivations, there's some potential for personal growth there, whereas your face is basically immutable. These kinds of disadvantages you're born with are immutable. But I think what I really didn't think of before this video, I think is even more hopeful, is talking about the nature of failure. What I said, so Melissa mentioned this, I used to say this all the time on YouTube, and I don't anymore. Try hard, get your heart broken, go back, try again. I talked about that process, but the truth is that's most meaningful and most rewarding with the life of the mind. And there's probably nothing meaningful and nothing rewarding about it. If you're talking about getting rejected, like let's say you're that person who's born deformed because your mom took a drug during pregnancy that, resulted in you being deformed. Okay. What's the value in that person hitting on someone, start flirting with someone and getting rejected? again and again, and flirting with different people. There's I can't say there's nothing. There's some value in that. You do learn something. There's some social interaction that you might gain some confidence or different perspective on life. You might gain a kind of philosophical view of the world. Okay, there's some, but there's very, very little. Whereas, when you're trying to climb mountains intellectually or what have you, even if you fall, even if you fail, I think it's there that you're going to find these things are rewarding.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.